Some widows wear black. She wore silence like armor. The funeral pyre had burned 3 days ago, and still Ilara could smell ash in her hair. The Northern Ridge Pack gathered in the stone hall, their eyes sliding past her like oil on water. She stood at the edge of the gathering, one hand pressed against her stomach, the other clutching the iron wolf pendant her mate had given her the night before he died. "The widow Ashford will leave at dawn," Alpha Corvus announced, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. He didn't look at her. He never did anymore. Pack law is clear. A mated Omega without her Alpha has no place in the hierarchy. Ilara's breath caught, but she didn't speak. What words could she offer? That she carried life even as death shadowed her? That the bond mark on her neck still burned some nights? Phantom pain from a connection severed too soon? The hall emptied slowly, wolves returning to their dens and duties. Corvus remained on the raised dais, reviewing scrolls by candlelight. His shoulders were broad as winter oak, his jaw carved from granite and regret. He'd been her mate's closest friend once, before the blood feud with the Eastern clans, before everything broke. "My Alpha," she said quietly, stepping forward. Her voice felt rusty, unused. "I need only a few weeks, just until—" "Until what?" Corvus interrupted, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes were storm gray, ancient and tired. "Until you find another pack willing to take in damaged goods? Until winter makes travel impossible and you become our burden?" Damaged goods. The words landed like stones in still water. Ilara's hand tightened on her pendant. "I'm carrying his child," she whispered. "Your blood brother's child. Doesn't that matter?" Something flickered across Corvus's face. Pain, perhaps. Or memory, but it vanished as quickly as breath in cold air. "It matters enough that I'm giving you provisions for the journey, more than most would offer." He returned to his scrolls, dismissing her. "Dawn, Widow Ashford," not a moment later. She turned and walked through the empty hall, her footsteps echoing like a heartbeat. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft and relentless. The pack lands stretched before her, silver under moonlight, and beyond them, only wilderness. In her small dwelling at the pack's edge, Ilara gathered what little remained: clothes, dried meat, her mate's hunting knife, the worn book of moon prayers her mother had given her. She worked by candlelight, methodical, refusing to let her hands shake. A knock sounded at the door. Beta Thorn entered without waiting for permission, his scarred face grave. He'd been the one to bring her mate's body back from the ambush, wrapped in blood-stained furs. "The Alpha's being a fool," he said without preamble, setting a heavy pack on her table. Extra blankets, silver coins, and this. He pulled out a small vial of luminescent liquid. "Moon's mercy. If you're injured badly enough, it'll keep you alive long enough to find help." "Thank you," Ilara managed, throat tight. Thorn studied her with knowing eyes. "How far along?" 8 weeks, maybe 9. He nodded slowly. "There's a healer in the Greystone territory, 3 days northwest. She takes in strays sometimes, doesn't ask questions." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Marcus would have torn this pack apart before letting anyone exile you." When he left, Ilara sat on the floor and finally let herself cry, not for the exile, but for the man who would never meet his children. Yes, children. She'd felt it yesterday, that strange doubling of presence inside her, like 2 separate flames flickering in darkness. Twins. The moon rose higher, spilling silver through her window. Ilara pressed both hands to her stomach and whispered a prayer to the goddess, asking not for mercy, but for strength, because mercy was a luxury the rejected couldn't afford. At dawn, she walked through the pack gates without looking back. The forest swallowed her whole. 3 days of walking had taken Ilara deep into the contested lands between territories, where pack law dissolved into survival and instinct. Her feet ached, Her back screamed, and the twins, she thought of them as twins now, though no healer had confirmed it, seemed to pulse with restless energy, as if they too sensed the danger pressing close. On the fourth night, she found shelter in a collapsed watchtower, its stone walls still sturdy enough to block the wind. She made a small fire, rationed her dried meat, and tried not to think about how far she still had to travel. The howl came at midnight. Not the communal song of a healthy pack, but something raw and broken, a sound of pain that made her wolf stir uneasily beneath her skin. Ilara rose, knife in hand, and peered through a gap in the stones. A massive wolf stumbled through the snow toward the tower, its fur matted with blood, one leg dragging uselessly. Even wounded, she could sense the power radiating from it, alpha dominance so thick it made the air taste like copper and ozone. The wolf collapsed 20 feet from her shelter. Ilara's instincts warred with each other. Help him and risk exposure, or let him die and preserve her safety. But then the wolf shifted, and suddenly a man lay bleeding in the snow, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, his face twisted in agony. Scars covered his chest, old and new, and a silver arrow protruded from his thigh. Silver, hunters. She was moving before conscious thought, dragging him toward the tower with strength born of desperation. He was heavy as granite, unconscious but still breathing. She got him inside, positioned him near the fire, and began cutting away the fabric around the arrow. His eyes snapped open, gold as ancient coins, fever-bright and dangerous. "Don't," he rasped, trying to push her away. "Silvers. Poisoned." "I know," Ilara said firmly, pinning his shoulder down with surprising force. "And if it stays in, you'll die, so lie still." She'd helped her mate treat injuries before, knew the basics of field medicine. The arrow had to come out in one pull, clean and fast. She wrapped cloth around her hand, gripped the shaft, met his fevered gaze. "On 3, 1. She pulled. His roar shook snow from the tower's broken roof, but the arrow came free, bloody and gleaming. Ilara immediately pressed Moon's mercy-soaked cloth against the wound, watching as the luminescent liquid fought the silver poisoning, tissue knitting together with agonizing slowness. The alpha's breathing gradually steadied. His eyes found hers, clearer now, filled with confusion and something that looked like recognition. "You're Omega," he said hoarsely. "Mated. Widowed." Ilara corrected, returning to her side of the fire. "And pregnant." Not a question. Alphas could always tell. She said nothing, simply wrapped her cloak tighter. "Why help me?" he asked after a long silence. "You don't know me. Could have let me die and taken what I carried." Ilara studied him across the flames. Even wounded, he radiated authority, the kind of presence that made other wolves bow instinctively. But his eyes held something else, a bone-deep weariness that mirrored her own. "Because you were dying," she said simply. "And I've seen enough death." He laughed, a rough sound without humor. "Practical mercy, my healers would approve." He shifted, wincing. "I'm Corvus, Alpha King of the Northern. I know who you are." Ilara interrupted quietly. His gold eyes sharpened. "Then you know I just exiled you." The fire crackled between them, throwing shadows on stone walls. Outside, wind howled through the broken tower like wolves singing dirges for the lost. "Yes," Ilara said, "I know." They didn't speak for 2 days. Corvus's wound healed with supernatural speed, aided by the moon's mercy and his alpha constitution. He hunted small game, repaired the tower's weak points, and maintained a careful distance, as if proximity to her might burn them both. Ilara understood. She kept to her routines, prayers at moonrise, careful rationing of supplies, whispered conversations with the lives growing inside her. The twins had become more active, their presence a constant hum beneath her ribs, like 2 small wolves already testing their strength. On the 3rd evening, Corvus broke the silence. "You should have told me," he said, not looking up from the rabbit he was skinning, "about the pregnancy. Before." Would it have changed anything? His knife paused. "I don't know. Honest, at least." Ilara added wood to the fire, watching sparks spiral toward the broken ceiling. "Marcus died believing you'd protect me, that our blood bond meant something. It did." Corvus's voice was rough as stone grinding stone. "It does. Then why exile his widow and unborn child?" The question hung between them like drawn steel. Corvus set down his knife, finally meeting her eyes across the flames. In the firelight, his face looked older, carved by responsibilities that had worn away everything soft. "Because keeping you would have started a war," he said quietly. "The Eastern Alliance wants any excuse to declare blood feud. They're already claiming Marcus died because I sent him into an ambush. If I'd kept his pregnant mate in my pack, they'd say I was securing his bloodline to strengthen my own claim." He exhaled slowly. 30 wolves dead, or 200. That was my choice. Ilara absorbed this, feeling the awful logic of it settle like frost in her chest. "So I'm collateral damage." "Your survival," Corvus corrected. "Exiled, you're neutral, politically invisible, alive." His gold eyes held hers. "Dead would have been easier for everyone, including you." The brutal truth of it stole her breath. She'd thought the exile was cruelty, but it had been its own terrible mercy, removing her from the board before she could become a target. "The hunters who shot you," she said slowly. "Eastern Alliance?" "Scouts testing our borders." Corvus resumed skinning the rabbit, efficient and practiced. "They're mobilizing. Spring will bring war whether I want it or not." Ilara thought of Marcus, of how he'd talked about peace negotiations even as tensions escalated. He believed war could be avoided. Marcus believed in a lot of things I couldn't afford to. There was no cruelty in Corvus's tone, only exhaustion, hope, diplomacy, the idea that doing right would somehow be enough. He looked up. "I loved him like a brother." But he was wrong. The fire popped, sending embers dancing. Outside, night had fully fallen, turning the forest into a cathedral of shadows and silver moonlight. Ilara felt the twins shift inside her, as if they too were listening, learning the shape of the world they'd be born into. "Where will you go?" Corvus asked. "Greystone territory. Thorn mentioned a healer there." "Maven," Corvus nodded. "She's trustworthy. I'll send word ahead. Make sure she takes you in." "You're returning to your pack?" "Tomorrow, my beta will be tearing apart the territory looking for me." He studied her with those ancient gold eyes. "Come with me." Ilara's heart stuttered. "You just explained why that's impossible." "As my healer's apprentice. Neutral position, beneath political notice. You'd be fed, protected, and when the twins are born—" He stopped, something flickering across his face. "They'd be safe." It was tempting. Goddess, it was tempting. But Ilara had learned the cost of living in spaces where she wasn't wanted, where her presence was strategic rather than valued. "No," she said softly. "But thank you." Corvus nodded, unsurprised. They sat in companionable silence as the fire burned low, two exiles in their own ways, bound by loss and the strange mercy of strangers. Before sleeping, Ilara spoke to the darkness beyond their shelter. "And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you." The wind answered with distant howls, and somewhere in the forest, a wolf sang alone. Dawn came too soon and too cold. Corvus was already awake when Ilara stirred, packing supplies with military efficiency. His wound had closed completely, leaving only a faint scar, Another mark in a collection that told stories of survival measured in blood and endurance. "There's something wrong with your heartbeat," he said without preamble, not looking at her. "I noticed it yesterday. Too fast, irregular." Ilara's hand went instinctively to her chest. "I'm fine. You're lying." He turned, gold eyes sharp. "And you're doing that thing pregnant omegas do when they're hiding something. What is it?" She hesitated, then realized he'd find out eventually. Alphas always did. "It's not my heartbeat you're hearing. It's theirs." Corvus went very still. Theirs. Twins. The word felt both like confession and revelation. "I think. I felt two separate presences since before the exile. Different rhythms, different energies." Something shifted in Corvus's expression. Not quite emotion, but its ghost. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides and dropped to one knee before her, the gesture so unexpected that Ilara froze. "May I?" he asked, voice rough. When she nodded, he pressed one large hand carefully against her stomach, just below her ribs. His eyes closed in concentration, and Ilara felt the strange pulse of alpha senses extending into her, reading life the way others read text. His eyes snapped open, wide with shock. "Gods," he breathed. 2 distinct heartbeats, 2 separate auras. He looked up at her, something like wonder breaking through his usual stone facade. "Do you know what this means? That I'll be twice as exhausted? That you're carrying alpha twins." Corvus rose, pacing now, energy radiating from him like heat from forged steel. Rare doesn't begin to describe it. Maybe 1 in 10,000 pregnancies. And the power signature. He stopped, studying her with new intensity. "You're not just any omega. You're a pathfinder." Ilara shook her head. "That's a myth. It's ancient bloodline magic. Omegas born with the ability to sense and amplify potential in others, especially alphas. Your mate probably never knew because it only fully manifests during pregnancy with alpha children." Corvus's voice carried certainty. "The twins aren't just drawing from Marcus's bloodline. They're drawing from yours. That's why they're so strong already." The words settled over Ilara like snowfall, cold and inexorable, and changing the landscape entirely. She'd always felt different, always sensed things in others that she couldn't name. Her mother had called it intuition. Her mate had called it empathy. But this? "If what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "then the Eastern Alliance will hunt you to extinction if they find out." Corvus's expression had gone dark, tactical. Pathfinder twins with alpha blood. They'd either force you into their pack as breeding stock or kill you to prevent me from having that advantage. Horror crawled up Ilara's spine. "You can't tell anyone." "I won't." He met her eyes, and she saw the oath forming there, ancient and binding. "On Marcus's grave, I swear it, your secret is safe." "Then I really should go to Maven's." "No." Corvus's voice carried absolute authority. "I was wrong. You need to come with me, but not as apprentice, as something no one will question." Ilara's heart pounded. "What?" "As my mate." The word detonated in the small space like thrown silver. Ilara stumbled back, shaking her head. "That's insane. You rejected me 4 days ago. I exiled a political liability. I'm claiming a strategic asset." Corvus's words were pure calculation, but something moved behind his eyes, something older than strategy. A widowed omega carrying her dead mate's children has no protection. The Alpha King's acknowledged mate, pregnant with potential heirs, untouchable. "False mate bond," Ilara said, voice shaking. "That's illegal under pack law. The goddess..." "The goddess," Corvus interrupted softly, "gives us choices. I'm choosing to protect you and those children. Whether you accept is your choice." Ilara's mind raced. The offer was practical, logical even. But it would mean returning to the pack that exiled her, living beside the alpha who'd called her damaged goods, pretending at a bond that would never form. And yet, The twins pulsed inside her, their heartbeats suddenly loud in her awareness, and she felt something else, not from Corvus, but flowing toward him. Her Pathfinder gift, awakening, showing her the shape of his power, immense but fractured, strong but carrying wounds that went deeper than silver arrows. He needed healing as much as she needed protection. "One condition," Alara said quietly. "This isn't real. We're not pretending it's destiny or fate or anything the goddess ordained. It's a contract, an arrangement." "Agreed." Corvus extended his hand, formal as treaty negotiations. "Until the twins are born and the war ends. Then you're free to leave if you choose." Alara took his hand. His palm was warm, calloused, and the moment they touched, something sparked. Not the mate bond's fire, but recognition nonetheless. Two broken things finding equilibrium. "We leave in an hour," Corvus said. "And Alara, when we reach the pack, you'll need to sell this. Fear, anger, resentment, none of that can show. You have to look like you forgave me. I don't forgive you, then you're a better actress than most." He managed something that might have been a smile. "Welcome to politics." The Northern Ridge Pack had transformed in her absence. Where before the pack lands had hummed with routine activity, now wolves drilled in combat formations, sharpened weapons, and reinforced borders. The scent of tension hung thick as wood smoke, and every eye that tracked Corvus's return also locked onto Alara at his side, her presence there an impossible thing. Beta Thorn met them at the main gates, his scarred face cycling through shock, confusion, and careful neutrality. "My Alpha," he said, studying them both. "We thought you dead, and the widow." "Is my mate now," Corvus announced, loud enough for the gathered wolves to hear. "Claimed and acknowledged. Any wolf who questions this questions me directly." The declaration rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Alara felt the weight of dozens of stares, felt her wolf instinctively press closer to Corvus for protection, even as her human pride rebelled. An older woman stepped forward, Maven, the healer, her silver-streaked hair bound in intricate braids. "The goddess's timing is strange," she said carefully. "But who are we to question her gifts?" She approached Alara, ignoring Corvus entirely, and placed one weathered hand on her stomach. Her eyes widened fractionally. "I see." "Yes." "Come, child. You need rest and proper food, not whatever road rations you've been surviving on." Maven led them through the packlands to Corvus's dwelling, not the modest quarters Alara had occupied before, but the Alpha's residence, a stone structure that spoke of power and age. Inside, it was surprisingly sparse, weapons on the walls, maps on the tables, few personal effects. "Maven knows," Alara said quietly once they were alone. "Maven knows everything." Corvus was already reviewing reports Thorn had left, his focus splitting between political necessity and her presence. "She won't speak of it, but she'll help with the pregnancy, and that's what matters." Over the following days, Alara learned the strange choreography of being an Alpha's public mate while remaining private strangers. They shared quarters, but not a bed. They appeared together at pack meals, at border meetings, at the endless preparations for war, presenting united fronts while maintaining careful distance in private. The pack gradually accepted her return, some with grudging respect, others with suspicion barely concealed. But none challenged Corvus directly, and that, she realized, was its own form of power. It was Maven who finally asked the question others only whispered. "Why did he really bring you back?" the healer asked one morning, examining Alara's growing stomach with practiced efficiency. The twins were thriving, their heartbeats strong and distinct, their presence increasingly demanding. "Protection," Alara answered honestly. "From what?" "Everything." She met Maven's knowing eyes. "Can I ask you something? About Alphas and guilt?" Maven's hand stilled. "Ah, you've noticed his shadows. He carries Marcus's death like a physical weight, like he could have prevented it somehow, He could have, Maven said bluntly, resuming her examination. If he'd forbidden Marcus from serving as envoy, if he'd sent more guards, if he'd declared war sooner and made the Eastern Alliance too afraid to attack. She straightened, meeting Alara's gaze. An Alpha King's choices create ripples. Some drown in them. Corvus simply learned to swim while carrying stones. That night, Alara found Corvus on the training grounds, alone, moving through combat forms with savage precision. Sweat gleamed on his skin despite the cold, and his breathing came hard and controlled. "You should be resting," he said without stopping. "So should you." Alara approached carefully, aware this was the first time she'd sought him out, rather than the reverse. "Maven says you haven't slept properly in weeks. Maven should mind her healing and leave pack management to me. She cares about you. She cares about everyone. It's exhausting." Corvus finally stopped, grabbing a cloth to wipe his face. In the moonlight, he looked younger, less carved from stone. "Why are you here, Alara?" "Because I felt it. The guilt. It's eating you alive." His jaw tightened. "Don't. Marcus didn't die because of you. He died because wolves from the Eastern Alliance ambushed him. That's on them. Not. He died because I needed a peace envoy, and I sent my best friend instead of going myself." Corvus's voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. "I chose politics over personal risk, and it cost him everything. Cost you everything. So no, you don't get to absolve me." Alara stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him, close enough to let her Pathfinder's senses extend fully. And there it was. The fracture in his power, the wound in his soul that bled slowly but constantly, weakening him from within. "You're right," she said softly. "I don't get to absolve you. Only you can do that." She placed one hand on his chest, over his heart. "But carrying this guilt won't bring him back. It'll just make sure his death destroyed 2 people instead of 1. For a long moment, Corvus simply stared at her, gold eyes reflecting moonlight and something that looked like drowning. Then, slowly, his hand covered hers. "I don't know how to stop," he admitted. "Then learn." Alara felt the twins respond to their proximity, their heartbeats synchronizing briefly with Corvus's. And she wondered if they could sense what she did, that this broken alpha might be exactly what their dead father would have wanted protecting them. Not perfect, not healed, but trying. That, perhaps, was enough. War came with the first thaw. Eastern Alliance scouts pushed into Northern Ridge territory at dawn, testing defenses, probing weaknesses. Corvus mobilized response teams immediately, his tactical mind shifting into the mode Alara had seen glimpses of: cold, efficient, brilliant. But she also saw the cost. Each decision weighed on him like stones added to an already impossible burden. Send warriors here. Leave that border vulnerable. Protect the eastern flank. Sacrifice the northern watch. Save many, lose few. The arithmetic of survival measured in wolf lives. Alara had taken to spending time in the healer's quarters, helping Maven prepare supplies and learning what she could about pregnancy complications, herbal remedies, emergency procedures. Anything to be useful, to have purpose beyond being protected. "You have Pathfinder gift," Maven said one afternoon, not looking up from the poultice she was grinding. "Have you tried using it?" "I don't know how." "It's not about knowing. It's about seeing." Maven set down her pestle, fixing Alara with eyes that held decades of accumulated wisdom. "Your mate carries wounds you could heal if you stopped being afraid of the connection." "He's not my mate." "Not really." The goddess doesn't recognize "not really." She recognizes need, capacity, and choice. Maven leaned forward. "Those twins inside you are drawing from both bloodlines, Marcus's alpha strength and your Pathfinder potential. They're already a bridge between past and future. What you do with that bridge is your choice. That evening, Alara found Corvus in his study, surrounded by maps and casualty reports. His face looked carved from exhausted stone, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep and the weight of command. 3 wounded, he said without looking up. None fatal, but Bronze lost use of his right arm. Eastern Alliance is pushing harder than intelligence suggested. We're outmanned. Alara approached slowly, studying the maps. Years of listening to Marcus discuss strategy had taught her to read terrain, force positioning, supply lines. You're defending everywhere. That means you're strong nowhere. Thank you for the tactical assessment, Corvus said dryly. Do you have a solution or just criticism? Concentrate your defense here. She pointed to a narrow valley on the map. Force them through the choke point. They'll have numbers, but you'll have position. Corvus studied the map, then her. That's Marcus's strategy. From the border skirmish 3 years ago. He talked about it constantly, said it was the best defensive position in the territory. Alara met his gaze. He'd want you to use it. Something shifted in Corvus's expression. Grief and gratitude tangled together. The problem is, executing it requires warriors I don't have. I'm stretched too thin as it is. Then recall the southern patrols. The Eastern Alliance isn't attacking from there, because that's where their main force is gathering. Corvus stood, pacing now, energy crackling around him. If I pull from the south, they'll swarm through and flank us. Only if they know you've pulled warriors. But if you move at night, keep presence patrols visible during day. Alara traced potential movements on the map, feeling something awaken in her mind. Not her knowledge, but Marcus's, somehow accessible through memory and grief and the bond that death hadn't fully severed. Corvus watched her, and slowly his expression shifted from skepticism to careful hope. That might work. They spent the next hours refining the strategy, arguing over details, finding the shape of something that could actually succeed. And in the process, Alara felt her Pathfinder gift stir, not healing yet, but recognition. She could see Corvus's tactical brilliance, could sense where his judgment was clouded by guilt or exhaustion, could nudge him toward clearer thinking. You're doing it, Corvus said quietly at one point. The Pathfinder thing. I can feel you in my head. Should I stop? No? He met her eyes across the map table, something raw and honest in his expression. It helps. You help. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and real. Outside, wolves prepared for battle, sharpened weapons, said prayers to the goddess. But in this room, 2 people found something neither expected: partnership. Corvus, Alara said carefully, when the twins are born, they'll need a father who's whole, not broken, not drowning in guilt. I know. Then let me help you heal, really heal. Not just tactical planning, but the wounds underneath. He looked at her for a long moment, gold eyes reflecting firelight and fear and something that might have been longing. I don't know if I deserve healing. Neither did I. Alara placed both hands on her stomach, feeling the twins move restlessly. But these 2 deserve a chance at something better than what we had. And that starts with us choosing to be better. Corvus crossed to her slowly, stopping close enough that she could feel his presence like heat from banked coals. If I let you in, really in, I don't know what you'll find. Then we'll find out together. He reached out, hesitated, then placed his hand over hers on her stomach. The twins responded immediately, their heartbeats synchronizing, their power reaching toward him with innocent trust. And Alara felt it fully for the first time, the potential connection, not the goddess-given mate bond, but something chosen and built and real. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. Outside, the moon rose full and silver, and somewhere in the darkness, war gathered like storm clouds. But in this moment, two broken people chose to build something worth defending. The battle came at dawn, just as Corvus predicted. Eastern Alliance forces pushed through the southern border in coordinated waves, expecting to find scattered resistance. Instead, they met Corvus's concentrated defense at the valley choke point. Northern Ridge warriors dug in with tactical advantage, unified command, and something the Alliance hadn't anticipated: desperation refined into strategy. Ilara watched from the pack's inner sanctum, surrounded by Maven and the other healers, feeling each clash of power through the pack bond that connected all Northern Ridge wolves. She felt warriors fall, felt Corvus's presence blazing like forge fire at the battle's center, felt her Pathfinder gift stretching toward him across distance, trying to steady his judgment, amplify his strength. The twins kicked frantically inside her, agitated by the violence flooding through pack connections. "Breathe," Maven instructed, one hand on Ilara's shoulder. "They feel your fear. Show them calm." But calm was impossible when she could sense Corvus fighting 3 Alliance warriors simultaneously, when she could feel his exhaustion mounting, when she knew that if he fell, the entire defensive line would collapse. Ilara closed her eyes and did what instinct demanded. She pushed her Pathfinder gift fully open, letting it flow toward Corvus like river breaking through ice. She couldn't fight beside him physically, but she could do this: steady his breathing, sharpen his awareness, give him the space to think instead of just react. And Corvus felt it. Even in battle's chaos, she felt him recognize her presence, felt him draw on the strength she offered. His movements became more precise, his decisions clearer, and slowly, so slowly, the battle's momentum shifted. By noon, the Eastern Alliance began retreating, leaving their wounded and dead on Northern Ridge soil. It wasn't total victory, but it was enough. They'd held. Corvus returned at sunset, covered in blood and ash, his eyes distant with the 1,000-yard stare of warriors who'd crossed into death's territory and somehow walked back. He moved through the celebrating pack like a ghost, accepting acknowledgments with mechanical nods, until he reached the sanctum where Ilara waited. Their eyes met, and something between them shifted permanently. "You were there," he said hoarsely, "in my head, during the worst of it. I had to help. You saved lives, dozens, maybe more." He crossed to her, dropping to his knees before her chair, exhaustion making the gesture seem less like submission and more like a man who'd run out of strength to stand. "Thank you." Ilara's hands found his hair without conscious thought, fingers threading through blood-matted strands. "Are you hurt? Nothing that won't heal." But his voice carried hollowness that spoke of wounds deeper than flesh. "I killed people today, Ilara. Alliance wolves, some barely older than pups. Necessary, maybe, but that doesn't make it clean." "No," she agreed softly. "It doesn't." They stayed like that as twilight deepened, Alpha King and Omega Widow, neither quite what they claimed to be, both carrying more weight than should be possible. The twins settled gradually, their frantic kicking easing as they felt their mother's heartbeat slow. "I need to tell you something," Corvus said finally, "about Marcus, about the ambush." Ilara's hands stilled. The Eastern Alliance wanted him specifically, not any envoy, him. Corvus raised his head, meeting her eyes. "Because he was working on peace negotiations they didn't want to succeed. And I knew sending him was dangerous. But I did it anyway because—" he exhaled shakily, "because he was my best friend, and I trusted him completely, and I thought that trust would somehow be armor." "It wasn't your fault," Ilara started. "Let me finish." His voice was gentle but firm. "It wasn't my fault he died, but it was my responsibility to prevent it, and I failed. That's not guilt, that's fact. And I've been carrying that fact like it was guilt, letting it poison everything." He took her hands in his. "Today, when you helped me, I realized something. Marcus would have wanted you protected at any cost, would have traded his life for yours and those twins without hesitation. So maybe the best way to honor him isn't drowning in regret. Maybe it's making sure his sacrifice meant something. Tears burned Alara's eyes. He loved you like a brother. I know, and I loved him the same. Corvus placed one hand carefully on her stomach, feeling the twins move beneath his palm. These two carry his bloodline, his strength. But they need more than genetics. They need a father present enough to actually raise them. The implication hung in the air, enormous and terrifying and real. We agreed this was temporary, Alara whispered, a contract until the war ended. I know what we agreed. Corvus's gold eyes held hers, vulnerable in ways she'd never seen. But somewhere between exile and battle, between strategy and survival, something changed. For me, at least. Alara's heart hammered. Corvus, I'm not asking you to love me, he interrupted gently. I'm asking if you could imagine building something real here, not pretending anymore, not for politics or protection, but because we choose it. The twins kicked in unison as if voting. Alara studied the alpha kneeling before her, scarred, exhausted, brilliant, broken in all the ways she was broken. And she felt her Pathfinder gift show her the truth. He wasn't offering her completion or rescue. He was offering partnership, the messy, complicated, real kind, where two damaged people chose each other and did the work. I don't love you, she said honestly. Not yet. Yet, Corvus repeated, something like hope flickering across his face. But I could. Maybe. If you stop thinking you need to be perfect before you deserve healing. That's a steep requirement. You're an alpha king. Steep is your specialty. He laughed, surprising them both. Then slowly, carefully, he stood and pulled her into an embrace. Not passionate, not desperate, but solid and real. Alara let herself lean into his strength, let herself accept support without fearing it would vanish. We'll figure it out, Corvus murmured against her hair. One day at a time. One day at a time, Alara agreed. Outside, the pack celebrated survival, and Maven smiled to herself in the healer's quarters, and the moon watched over two souls learning to build home from wreckage. Spring unfolded slowly, bringing green growth and uneasy peace. The Eastern Alliance had withdrawn after their failed assault, not surrendering but regrouping. Scouts reported troop movements, whispered alliances, preparations for something larger. But for now, Northern Ridge had breathing room. And in that space, Alara bloomed. Her pregnancy advanced rapidly, the twins growing with supernatural speed that left Maven muttering about Pathfinder bloodlines and alpha genetics. By the 8th month, Alara's stomach was enormous, her movements careful, her energy focused entirely on the two lives demanding more space, more resources, more attention. Corvus had become attentive in ways that surprised them both. He attended healer appointments, learned about complications, prepared the alpha's dwelling for infant twins with meticulous care. But more than that, he talked to them, pressed his ear to Alara's stomach at night, and told the twins stories of pack history, of battles won and lost, of the grandmother they'd never meet, and the uncle who'd loved them before they existed. You're going to spoil them, Alara said one evening, watching him arrange carved wooden wolves on a shelf he'd built. That's the plan. Corvus stepped back, examining his handiwork. They should know they're wanted, loved, that they don't have to earn their place here. The words hit deeper than he probably intended. Alara had spent so much of her life earning, proving, justifying her existence. The idea of children simply being enough by existing felt revolutionary. Will the pack accept them? She asked quietly. Alpha twins born from a dead mate and claimed by you? The legitimacy questions are irrelevant. Corvus crossed to her, settling onto the floor beside her chair. I've already issued the formal declaration. These children are mine by choice and law. Any wolf who challenges that challenges me directly. And when they're older, when they ask about Marcus, then we tell them the truth. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally now. That their biological father was the bravest wolf I knew, that he loved their mother fiercely, that he would have built worlds for them if he'd lived. Corvus met her eyes. But that I'm here. I'm present, and I chose them just as deliberately as he would have. Ilara felt tears burn. You've changed. So have you. It was true. The frightened widow who'd been exiled had transformed into something stronger, not harder, but tempered. She'd learned to command respect, to speak in pack councils, to use her Pathfinder gift to help settle disputes and guide younger wolves. She'd become, without quite intending to, a leader in her own right. I think I'm falling in love with you, Ilara admitted softly. Not the explosive destiny kind, the quiet choosing kind. Corvus's breath caught. That's the better kind anyway. Destiny fades. Choice endures. He leaned forward and kissed her. The first real kiss since their arrangement began, soft and careful and tasting like possibility. The twins kicked enthusiastically, and they broke apart laughing. They have opinions, Corvus observed. They have your stubborn disposition. Goddess, help us all. The moment was interrupted by Beta Thorn bursting through the door, his expression urgent. My Alpha, Eastern Alliance envoy at the border, requesting parley. Corvus was on his feet instantly, battle readiness replacing domestic softness. How many? Just one, female, carrying peace flag. Corvus and Ilara exchanged glances. Could be a trap, she said. Could be genuine. He helped her stand carefully. Either way, we need to know what they want. The parley took place at the border crossing, neutral ground where pack territories met. The Alliance envoy was a silver-haired woman with eyes like winter storms, carrying herself with authority that suggested high rank. I am Senna, First Counsel to the Eastern Alliance, she announced. I come with terms. We're listening, Corvus said, flanked by his guard, Ilara standing slightly behind him. Senna's eyes tracked to Ilara, lingering on her pregnant stomach with calculating assessment. Congratulations on the impending heirs, twins, I hear. Quite remarkable. State your terms, Corvus said, voice flat. The Alliance proposes a truce, 5 years renewable. In exchange, we require... Senna smiled, cold as frost. Access to your Pathfinder Omega. Our healers wish to study her gift. 3 months service per year. She'll be compensated naturally. The clearing went silent. Ilara felt her blood turn to ice. They knew. Somehow, despite all precautions, the Alliance had learned what she was. Corvus's power erupted outward, making wolves on both sides flinch. Absolutely not. Then war resumes in spring, Senna said calmly, with 3 times the forces. We'll burn your territory to ash and take her anyway. This way, at least you have peace. This way, you weaponize my mate and use her against me. Your mate? Senna laughed. We both know that's political fiction. She's the widow of your dead second, claimed for convenience. Don't pretend this is about love. Ilara stepped forward, letting her Pathfinder gift open fully, letting Senna feel the weight of her power. You want 3 months? I'll give you 3 days, after the twins are born. I'll come to your territory, I'll demonstrate my gift, and I'll answer questions, under oath that no harm comes to me or mine. 3 days, once only. That's my offer. Senna studied her with new respect. The widow speaks with alpha authority. Interesting. She considered, then nodded. Agreed. 3 days, post-birth, under sacred oath. We'll send word to arrange details. When the envoy left, Corvus rounded on Ilara. What were you thinking? That war would kill thousands, including possibly you. 3 days of discomfort seems like a reasonable price. They'll try to manipulate you, study you, find weaknesses. Then they'll fail. Alara met his furious gaze steadily. I'm not the frightened widow anymore, Corvus. I'm a pathfinder carrying alpha twins. I'm the mate of the Northern Ridge Alpha King. And I'm done letting fear make my decisions. His anger dissolved into something that looked like awe. You're terrifying. Good. She took his hand, pressing it to her stomach, where the twins kicked in agreement. These two deserve a world where peace is possible, even if we have to build it ourselves. That night, lying in bed with Corvus's protective arm around her, Alara whispered to the twins and to the goddess, "Let us be strong enough. Let us be wise enough. Let us build something worth inheriting." The moon offered no answer, but the twins' heartbeats pulsed steady and sure, and that felt like promise enough. Labor came at midnight, 3 weeks early, fierce and relentless. Maven had warned that Pathfinder births were unpredictable, that alpha twins would be demanding, but nothing prepared Alara for the reality. Waves of power erupting from her core, threatening to tear her apart from within. The twins weren't just being born, they were announcing themselves, letting everyone within miles feel their presence. Corvus stayed with her through it all, holding her hand, letting her crush his bones during contractions, whispering encouragement when her strength wavered. "I can't," Alara gasped after 6 hours. "It's too much." "You can." Corvus's gold eyes held hers, steady as stone. "You walked through exile. You survived grief. You chose healing when revenge would have been easier. This is nothing you can't handle." Maven worked efficiently, monitoring positions, checking vitals, preparing for every complication. They're both positioned correctly. Alpha female first, then alpha male. Your body knows what to do, Alara. Trust it. The final push felt like dying and being reborn simultaneously. Alara screamed, pulling on every reserve of strength, feeling her Pathfinder gift flare so brightly that wolves throughout the territory stopped and looked toward the Alpha's dwelling, sensing something momentous occurring. Then, a cry, high and furious and alive. "Female Alpha," Maven announced, placing a squirming perfect infant on Alara's chest. "Strong lungs, strong presence. What's her name?" Alara looked down at her daughter. Dark hair, gold-flecked eyes already opening, power radiating from her tiny body like heat from sun. "Lyra," she said, "for the constellation, for guidance in darkness." Minutes later, her son arrived with equal fury, silver-eyed and vocal, already challenging the world with his first breath. "And him?" Maven asked. Corvus spoke before Alara could. "Marcus, if that's acceptable." Alara's eyes filled. Yes, Marcus and Lyra. Perfect. They worked through the medical necessities in exhausted silence, cleaning, examining, counting fingers and toes. Both twins were healthy, impossibly alert, already seeking their parents with preternatural awareness. When finally they were alone, Corvus, Alara, and the twins, the Alpha King did something Alara had never seen. He wept. Silent tears tracking down his scarred face as he held his son, looked at his daughter, and felt the full weight of responsibility and love crash over him like avalanche. "I won't fail them," he whispered. "I swear on everything I am." "I know," Alara said softly, "because we're doing this together." The next days blurred into feeding, sleeping, learning the twins' rhythms. Marcus was calm and observant, analyzing everything with silver eyes that seemed ancient. Lyra was fierce and demanding, already showing alpha dominance that made the pack guards nervously amused. But eventually, inevitably, the Eastern Alliance sent word, 3 days, as promised, to honor Alara's oath. "I'm going with you," Corvus insisted as she prepared to leave. "You can't. Alpha Kings don't enter rival territory. It's suicide." "Then I'll send 20 warriors." "Corvus," Alara took his face in her hands, making him meet her eyes. "I'm strong enough for this, and if I'm not, I'll learn. But I need you here, protecting the twins, holding the pack together. That's where you're needed most." He wanted to argue. She saw it warring across his face, the instinct to protect versus the logic of her words. Finally, he pulled her into fierce embrace. "If they harm you, war becomes inevitable. They won't, because I'm more valuable whole." She kissed him, deep and real. 3 days, then I come home. The Eastern Alliance territory was colder than Northern Ridge. The architecture all sharp angles and military precision. Senna met her at the border, surprisingly cordial. "The Pathfinder widow. Welcome." "Pathfinder mate," Alara corrected. "And mother. Let's be accurate." Over 3 days, Alara demonstrated her gift, helping Alliance healers understand trauma bonds, showing them how Pathfinder energy could stabilize wounded alphas, explaining the theory behind what she barely understood herself. But she also observed, learned their power structures, identified fractures in their unity. On the final evening, Senna invited her for private conversation. "You could stay," the First Council said. "Build a life here. We treat you better than Northern Ridge ever did. You exiled me. Corvus brought me home. He claimed you for strategy. And then chose me for real." Alara stood, meeting Senna's calculating gaze. "The difference between you and him is simple. You see tools. He sees people. And that's why Northern Ridge will endure when your alliance crumbles." Senna's smile was ice. "We'll see. Wars have a way of revealing truth." When Alara returned to Northern Ridge, Corvus was waiting at the border, the twins strapped to his chest in makeshift carriers, both babies sleeping peacefully against their father's heartbeat. The sight stole Alara's breath. This powerful alpha reduced to domestic guardian, and somehow more magnificent for it. "They missed you," he said simply. "I missed them, all of you." She kissed each baby's head, then Corvus. "The Alliance is planning something. I don't know what, but Senna was too confident, too comfortable letting me leave. Then we prepare." Corvus shifted Marcus slightly, the infant making small sounds of complaint. "But tonight, we rest. Tomorrow, we strategize. That's how we survive, one day at a time." That night, their small family gathered in the Alpha's dwelling. Corvus had built a fire, Maven had delivered food, and the twins lay between their parents, staring up at faces they were learning to recognize as home and safety. "Tell me something," Alara said softly, watching firelight play across Corvus's features. "Do you ever regret it? Claiming us? The complications we brought?" Corvus was quiet for a long moment, studying the twins with expression that held entire universes of emotion. "I regret many things, decisions that cost lives, words I didn't say, time I wasted on guilt instead of action." He looked at her, gold eyes reflecting flame and certainty. "But you three? Never. You're the first thing I've done right in years. Even though we're not destined mates, no goddess bond, especially because of that." He reached across the twins to take her hand. "Destiny is easy. It requires nothing from us except acceptance. But choice, building something real from broken pieces, that's the hard work, the meaningful work." Lyra chose that moment to wake and demand feeding with typical alpha authority. Ilara laughed, lifting her daughter, marveling at how something so small could contain so much fierce personality. "She's going to be trouble," Corvus observed fondly. "She's going to be magnificent," Alara corrected. "They both are, because they'll grow up knowing love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day and doing the work." Marcus woke more quietly, silver eyes opening to study his father with that unsettling ancient wisdom. Corvus lifted him carefully, cradling his son like precious treasure, and Alara felt her Pathfinder gift show her the truth. This Alpha who'd carried so much guilt, who'd thought himself unworthy of healing, had been transformed by 2 tiny lives and 1 stubborn widow into something better than he'd ever imagined possible. "I love you," Alara said, surprising herself with the certainty of it. "Not because of destiny or circumstance, because you chose us when you didn't have to, because you learned to choose yourself, because you're building the kind of father these 2 deserve." Corvus's eyes shimmered. "I love you too. Have for weeks, maybe months. Was just too afraid to admit it." "Alpha King, afraid? Of the things that matter?" "Always." He smiled, rare and genuine. "But you taught me fear and courage aren't opposites. Courage is choosing to move forward despite the fear." They sat like that as night deepened. 2 parents, 2 infants, 1 family built from loss and choice and the daily work of healing. Outside, the pack settled into evening routines. Guards changed shifts, and somewhere in the distance, wolves sang to the moon. Maven appeared in the doorway, her silver hair gleaming. "The pack is asking if they can meet the heirs officially. Tomorrow, perhaps?" "Tomorrow," Corvus agreed. "Let them see what we're protecting, what we're building toward." After Maven left, Alara looked at the man beside her. Scarred, complex, no longer drowning, but learning to swim. "What do you think the future holds?" "War, probably. The Alliance isn't done with us." Corvus adjusted Marcus, who'd fallen back asleep. Politics, complications, the endless work of leadership. He met her eyes, but also this, nights like this. Watching them grow, teaching them to be better than we were, building something that outlasts us. That's enough? That's everything. The twins slept peacefully, unaware of the complicated world awaiting them, knowing only warmth and safety and the rhythm of their parents' heartbeats. And in that moment, Alara understood what redemption really meant. Not the erasure of past pain, but the transformation of it into something that could nourish growth. Marcus the Elder would have loved this, she thought, would have loved seeing his children protected, his widow healing, his best friend finally learning to forgive himself. As if hearing her thoughts, Corvus spoke quietly. "I still miss him. Don't think I'll ever stop." "Good," Alara said. "That means the love was real. The friendship mattered. His death meant something." She leaned into Corvus's shoulder. "We honor him by living fully, by raising these 2 to embody his best qualities, by building the peace he died trying to achieve. No pressure on the infants then. They're alphas. They can handle it." Lyra's tiny fist opened and closed in sleep, already grasping for the world. Marcus's breathing synced with his father's, learning rhythm and safety, and their parents watched over them with the fierce protective love of wolves who'd survived winter and emerged stronger. The moon rose higher, spilling silver through windows, blessing this small family with light that had witnessed countless generations of wolves loving, fighting, surviving, and ultimately choosing hope over despair. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. Outside, the wind carried distant howls, pack songs, territorial markers, the eternal conversation of wolves with moon and earth. Inside, warmth and milk scent and the soft sounds of sleeping infants created their own kind of music. Corvus pulled Alara closer, careful not to disturb the twins, and whispered against her hair, "Thank you for not giving up on me, on us. Thank you for giving me a reason not to." She kissed him softly. "Now let's get some sleep before they wake up demanding everything simultaneously. That's 2 hours from now, maximum. Then 2 hours of peace is better than none." They settled into the silence that comes after crisis, that calm space where healing finally becomes possible. The twins breathed softly between them, bridges between past and future, proof that love could be rebuilt from wreckage, that redemption wasn't a destination, but a daily choice. And in the morning, they would face whatever came, war or peace, threat or triumph, together. As partners, as parents, as two broken people who'd learned that sometimes the strongest bonds aren't given by destiny, but forged through choosing each other again and again, in all the small moments that build a life. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on stone walls. Somewhere in the packlands, a wolf howled long and mournful, and others answered, weaving harmonies that spoke of sorrow, transformed into strength, of endings that became beginnings, of widows and kings, and the fierce tender work of building home from ashes. Alara closed her eyes, feeling Corvus's heartbeat beneath her cheek, feeling the twins' presence like warm stars in the darkness, and finally, let herself believe in tomorrow. The story of the grieving widow and the guilt-haunted king would be told for generations, how exile became homecoming, how rejection became redemption, how two heartbeats inside her led an alpha king to hear his own heart again. But tonight, they were simply a family, imperfect, hard-won, and absolutely real. And that was enough.